Hi guys. Welcome to Universal Recovery. My name is Saf, and of course TJ. As always, we are here every Tuesday. Hi TJ, how you doing, bud?
Great, Saf. Thank you so much. Looking forward to our show, which is an interesting way to say looking forward, but I'm grateful to be here, and I know you're going through a lot. So here we are, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you, TJ. And I'd like to thank you for supporting me and allowing this show to be dedicated to a wonderful man who passed away a few days ago. Zach. Zach was my friend. He was more than my friend. He was my best friend. He was my brother, my mentor, my go-to person. He was, you know what, a measure of a man is when someone who would break their back for you, even when they're going through harsh and hard times themselves, and that's Zach. That's Zach right there. He had this humor about him as well, and I could go on the whole show about Zach. It's been tough, and my love and my heart and everything I've got goes to his whole family, Russell, Umreen, and Arab in particular, his brothers, his sisters. We're gonna miss him. We're gonna miss this gentleman, this one of the kindest souls I've ever known. It's going to be hard. So I like to dedicate Universal Recovery show today to a wonderful man that we have lost called Zach. Yeah, I hope you guys can see this if you can, because I don't know if we're having problems with Facebook. I've got some comments. Scott, hi there. So hi Robert, hi Angel, as always. And even though the show's about recovery, TJ, and mainly addiction recovery, of course I want to speak about loss today. One to help people who have experienced loss in the past or are experiencing loss now, like myself and of course Zach's immediate family and friends. But also, how does conscious recovery work with people who deal with loss? Because I can tell you right now, a few years ago, something like this would have very easily led me to relapse. Losing Zach would have been the first thing I would have turned to, would have been a drink or drug. But it's not like that today. How can we help people, one, get through loss through conscious recovery, but also reduce the chances of relapse?
Well, this conversation obviously is multi-layered. So thank you, first of all, for having the courage to be here on the show and let us know what's happening. Because for me, the first and foremost, I think the very best information I could offer to anyone who's going through any kind of loss of a loved one, loss of a job, loss of any situation that means a great deal is this, and that is whatever you're experiencing is perfectly okay. You know, I think a lot of times in our culture, we feel like we're supposed to say something or say something profound. And the reality is, during this type of loss, there's really nothing to say. It's really more about being present. So being present with you right now, Saf, and being present with anyone who's going through loss, and recognize that really what is wanted and needed is presence, openness. And if I'm the person who's going through loss, like all of us, of course, who are born on planet Earth will experience loss unless we just don't have anyone or anything in our life that we care about. So I think first and foremost, it's honoring and recognizing and having compassion for whatever's happening. Many of us want to avoid or to bury, right? And I think that's how it ties into the addiction piece, because there's nothing more, for me, my own addiction and working with clients throughout the years, at the root of a lot of addiction is avoidance, right? This is too painful. This is too difficult. Let me numb out. Let me change the way I'm feeling. And so if that's true, if that's what addiction is, then recovery is being present with what is, as painful as it might be. You know, we tend to, in our culture, use language around positive and negative as it comes to emotions. And the reality is emotions are simply a part of our life, and being able to be present and allow those feelings to emerge and not going into any kind of story about good, bad, right, wrong, I think is the number one thing we can do. And in a sort of an interesting way, I think that's the best way I can honor someone. You know, Seth, I'm thinking about some of the mentors I've had in my life as they've made their transition. The number one thing is simply allowing myself to feel whatever's present, whether that's sadness or anger or joy or laughter, numbness, whatever's there, being present with it and learning how, as we all are, learning how to be present with that and not try to shift that, but just to simply be with whatever is emerging in the moment.
I think that's a very important point, and but it's tough.
Yeah.
It's extremely hard, and I think because with addiction in particular, when you experience a loss, or when it's like you're searching for a connection again.
Right.
You're searching for that same connection which you can't have right now, because that connection with that person who you have lost, and we're not just talking about someone passing away, we're talking about a boyfriend, girlfriend, mom, dad, whatever, leaving, but obviously bereavement is the biggest loss, and losing a loved one, that connection, the physical connection, is no longer there, but there is a spiritual connection still, right?
Right.
If we look through the spiritual lens, can you tell us a bit about, because where conscious recovery comes from the spiritual lens, can we use that with a loss as well?
Without a doubt. And I think there are two things that I would like to sort of address as we're navigating this. One is that I think there's a tendency sometimes to do a spiritual bypass, meaning like, oh, well, now they're in the spirit realm and I'm still connected with them, everything is okay. Now, that is true on one level, right? That obviously there's truth to that spiritually, and I'm still having this experience of whatever it is. You know, I worked with someone, this is an example that I worked with someone who had been caring for her mother for over a decade. She was the primary caregiver. It was very, very painful. And so when her mother passed away, she was filled with joy and relief, not only for herself, but for her mother. And people kept wanting her to feel sad. Now, that just wasn't what she was feeling, right? So the reason I say that is whatever I'm feeling when I'm going through loss is perfectly acceptable. It's perfectly normal. And I'm saying that again because I want to bring that point. And then also recognize there's this other layer where in the spiritual world, there's never disconnection. And that was my experience with my beloved Mary Helen when she made her transition. She was my mentor and just really was an instrument for changing my life in such a powerful way. And I did allow myself to grieve, and I felt it, and the memories that were coming back and the gratitude and the sadness all mixed together. And then on the other side of that, I felt more connected with her than ever. I felt like, wow, we've sort of removed this veil that we have, this human experience. And I was able to feel the energy of her in a more profound way in some ways than when she was alive. So it's also important to say that, yes, whatever we're feeling is not only acceptable, but it's perfectly normal, but also remind ourselves that the experience is temporary and that we do go through it. And as I honor the emotional experience, we do come out the other side. You know, this does have an ending. You know, these painful feelings won't go on forever unless we bury them, and then they just stay alive. So allowing ourselves to feel and knowing and trusting that all these different things, we can hold these multiple truths at once. Yes, spiritually, we're going to be always connected. The energy of that person is always within us. Yes, it's really painful right now, and it's important for me to acknowledge and allow myself to feel. And at the same time, I know that I'm going to walk through this and it will change at some point. So holding all of that at once, I think, is the conscious way to grieve, because we can grieve unconsciously, and our culture supports that a lot. So we want to allow ourselves to be conscious as we grieve, knowing and trusting that it's part of the human experience and the spiritual experience.
And you say some very good points there, because I think it's important to recognize and to acknowledge what has happened, rather than running away from it. But people grieve differently.
Sure.
EJ, I'm very quiet, which is unlike me in normal. But I become very quiet and very reserved, and I've up and down emotions like I have done in the last few 4 days. People grieve differently, and it's one of those ones where, when I look at, for example, I'm going to talk about Zach because that's the most closest and dearest death I've had after my parents, and my uncle. When I look at the photographs, I feel happy, but then I feel sad straight away.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then my emotions are all over the place. And I guess the immediate family, if I'm going through that, what are they going through? This guy was a remarkable human being, Zach, but it's not even about what he was as a person. He will be missed by many, many, many people. And again, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share or dedicate this to him. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's, again, it's so multi-layered, and just allowing myself to be with whatever's present. And as you say, we all grieve differently, and the reality is I might grieve differently 5 minutes from now than I am in this moment. For me, I know that having people that I can simply share what's happening for me is a part of the process. In other words, not keeping it to myself. And that doesn't mean that that's going to be for everyone, right? Someone else might need to really spend some quiet time honoring that person. You said something that I think is an aspect of grief, and that is really honoring the person that has passed or made a transition into a different realm. I'm going back to Mary Helen with that, because there was something that happened for me, Saf, and it was in the midst of the grieving process. And it was so powerful for me because I was honoring who she is as a spirit and who she was as this particular human incarnation. And there was a point where I had this moment where there was something that shifted within me. And I realized that her life's work, what she came here to do, was now mine to carry. There was something about it that felt so powerful for me. It was almost like she was sending, well, it's not almost like, I really feel that she was sending me a message, almost like, okay, it's your turn now. And I was, in a very confused part of my life, and I wasn't really living on purpose in terms of bringing this message of oneness, of love into the world. And so there was something about her passing. See, because I think our human mind, many of us have been trained to think it's either this or it's that. But the truth is, it's all of it at once, right? I was missing her. I was grieving. I was sad that that connection meant so much to me. And then at the same time, I was also experiencing, oh my gosh, there's something profound that just happened in her passing, because I really want to pick up this torch now and carry this light into the world. And then it'll be my turn, right? It'll be my turn at some point to pass that torch to someone else. And, the reality is none of us know when it's our time to make our transition. So I, in some ways, want to live every moment like it's never going to happen. And then also live every moment like it's about to happen, and as strange as that may sound, I think there is a lineage that happens, right? That's consciousness. We pass consciousness through each other. In other words, Mary Helen is quite alive within me in every single thing that I do, every book I write, at this particular show, and I know that we're dedicating this show to Zach, and that is, I'm guessing, part of your experience is honoring him too, because that's what I hear you saying.
100%. And I'm so grateful that, we're able to do a show where we can have some kind of control, where we can do things like this and where we can speak about our loved ones, as opposed to some producer saying, you can't do this, you can't do that. And to be fair, Debbie G, who arguably is probably our producer, stroke the manager of the owner of the Spirituality Gone Wild, I think she would welcome welcomed this for sure. And this is what makes platforms like this for us to be a voice for everyone, really. I wanted to ask you something as well, TJ, because I'm, as far as I know, and I don't know everyone that Zach knew, but a lot of his family and friends, the ones that I know of, aren't addicts.
Yeah.
Or have not overindulged in alcohol or drugs, if at all. This is a sort of sad event that could possibly turn them to that direction. So we're not talking about relapse, we're talking about someone who could, because of this, could turn to something like that, which is not unheard of. What would you say to that? I mean, I hope that doesn't happen, especially with the close family. But because, I mean, all I can say on my experience is that when my father passed away, yes, I was still in active addiction, but my addiction went to another level in terms of finding another drug. In my example, was crystal meth, and that took it to a different level. I'm not saying it's because of the death, but the time was so close. It subconsciously may have had something to do with it. What can we say to someone who is looking for something that could possibly turn them to that road when we don't really want them to go there? Not today, really.
Yeah, and you're speaking to something that we see a lot, right? Someone has a significant loss and may turn to something for comfort, and that's, of course, obviously understandable. So if a person is someone who doesn't, have a classic addiction, we could have a whole show on how addicted our culture actually is. I know we've talked about this before, Saf. So all of us have some degree of turning outside of ourselves for some kind of comfort, but we have seen a moment like this that's so significant where people will turn to something that we would classically call addiction, like drugs and alcohol. And it goes back to the same principles that we talked about in the beginning of the show. And that is, can I create a space to allow myself to feel and honor what is happening? One of the things I want to speak to is also that when we experience loss, we're experiencing the loss of a person or a situation, but we're also experiencing the loss of every loss we've had. I don't know, Saf, if you relate to this, but I remember after a breakup calling all of my exes, and I'm like, wait, what am I doing? Because I know that we broke up for a reason, but I just longed for that type of connection, right? And so my heart was really hurting. And at the time, I wasn't maybe as conscious as I am now, and that's always an evolution. So I was really yearning for someone to love me or to appreciate me. And so just normalizing that and recognizing that it's this loss and it's others, right? When we look at trauma, we know that when someone goes through a traumatic event, if they have PTSD symptoms, almost always it's also about earlier trauma. And when we have loss, that can get activated. And many of us aren't even aware of it. I mean, there obviously are advantages and disadvantages to be in recovery. One of the great advantages is I was kind of forced to go onto a spiritual path because it was getting really, really rough. I couldn't keep doing the addiction the way I was and stay alive. Not everyone has that, right? And not everyone might have the built-in support group that some of us in recovery do. So it's the basic principles that we've talked about. Get support, honor where you're at with this to the best of your ability, allow yourself to feel, and recognize that you can hold multiple truths or multiple experiences at once. I can feel relief, I can feel joy, I can feel sadness, I can feel anger all at once. And I can also honor that this is, yes, it's this loss, and this loss is important, and it's also most likely reactivating things from the past. So even more of an opportunity to really be gentle with ourselves. And just, again, the best advice I was given when I was going through a loss whatever you're feeling is perfectly okay. And for whatever reason, that helped me so much, Saf, because I had a story that, oh, I shouldn't grieve this way, or I shouldn't feel that, or, oh, it's appropriate only to feel this, but not that. So those are, I think, some of the different pieces I would offer.
Don't beat yourself up about it. Be gentle to yourself. And think of the person that we've lost fondly.
Yeah.
Because the memories will always be memories, and that cannot be taken away.
Yeah.
That will never be taken away. Whether you're alive or you're not alive, that will always, memories will always be there. But obviously, we look at memories more when someone has left us, and that's what I'm doing, and that's what Russell and Umreen and Arib who are doing, who are two beautiful children. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because it's very raw. It's very fresh. They do say time's a healer. I can agree with that, with my experience. But you'll never forget them.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other piece I wanted to speak to, and I think this is true with just about anyone that we lose, at least in the physical realm, is that there are layers to it, right? Like especially someone that I work with, maybe they lose a parent, and not only are they grieving, not only are they fondly remembering everything about them, they might also be in touch with what felt unresolved. And I think it's an important thing to speak to because when we have, for example, who was my best friend for many, many years, we had a business deal that did not go well. And we had been slightly estranged. I'll put it that way. I knew in my heart that we were always connected. And he died suddenly in a car accident before we could resolve that. And interestingly enough, something happened with me. I had a deeper level at that time, and this was many years ago. I had a deeper level at that time of what forgiveness was really about. It wasn't really about what we've been taught it was about, because when he died, I had an experience where I realized, oh, we're not going to be able to sit down and talk this through. I knew we would because we had this 25-year friendship and a deep love for one another. It was in that moment that I realized, oh my gosh, it's a shift in consciousness. It's not about right and wrong and good and bad. It's more about moving into the love that I have for the person. And the reason I'm bringing that into this conversation is most of us, when we have loss, have at least some degree of either I wish I could have, or I wish I would have, or, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how important this person was, or there's a deeper level of that, or, oh gosh, that one time that I didn't go on that vacation with them, so that's also part of it. And that is not something that we need to shut down, but just, be aware of, kind of thank you for sharing. That's part of the process, going through everything in our relationship and looking at what we consider to be the good and the bad. And again, it's just normalizing whatever we're feeling and simply allowing it to be there, while also recognizing that that's what my mind does. My mind will go into, I wish I could have, if only I would have. All of that is part of the process.
Well, exactly. And in these uncertain times as well, it's like, wow. It's like, I mean, I went to the cemetery today, TJ, and going to cemeteries is quite a hard thing for me anyway, but I went today to support the family in particular, but also to say my last goodbyes. But it will never be a goodbye as far as I'm concerned. But the amount of graves, new graves that were there, it was like going to a cemetery when a war's just finished. It was like I've never seen anything like it. And diggers are still digging, and then as we were leaving, another person passed away, and it's like, it was very overwhelming, and it was a profound experience just looking at all of this. But it was an experience of, it was hard. It was hard, and I think it's important to take this, what's going on in the world, seriously right now, and try and stay safe. I know some people are ambivalent about what's going on. All I can say is that I've lost a few people because of this, and I'm taking it seriously.
Yeah. And, you're speaking to something that, we're in the midst of this global event, if you will, that is on some level very traumatic for many of us, whether we have loss of people that we loved, or, a friend of a friend, or even loss of our ability to be in our daily life. Maybe we've lost work. We are, and I know we talked about this either last week or the week before, we are seeing a huge spike in addiction right now, and mental health issues and suicide. And I know we've talked about that, but it's also important to say that as well. And, people are trying to manage an experience that no one on planet Earth that's alive today has experienced anything quite like it. Now, I know there are people that are alive today that, have been through the Holocaust and other horrific events. So we're not minimizing that. But for a huge portion of the population, we haven't experienced anything quite like this. And it's unique. And honoring, I keep going back to this, but it's just honoring the experience and honoring what is happening. What we see happening in this kind of event, I think, is the mind wants to take over. And if I'm plugged into what's happening in the media and everything, it can be a frenzy of fear. And we can honor it and recognize what's happening. And as you said, Seth, make our decisions about what feels safe for us, while also not going into our minds, because what has been created, at least in part from it, is some divisiveness of like, this camp feels that way, that camp feels that way. And I want to bring some awareness to having compassion for each of us in the midst of this, because I think when we're in the middle of a traumatic experience, at least a large part of us, or at least a large number of us, go into freeze, right? We have fight, flight, or freeze. And a lot of us freeze in the middle of this. And as we move through this, which we are, right, we know there is a light at the end of this. And that's not to minimize the loss that we've experienced because of it. And when we get through this, I think taking a deep breath, a lot of us are going to maybe feel some of that, some of the emotions that have been frozen during this time as well. So remember that back to whatever we're experiencing and feeling is not only perfectly okay, it's really part of this process in this, in these, I'm hesitating to say some of the cliches, but in the uncertain times, in the unprecedented times, we hear it over and over again. And the reality is that for many of us, that's true.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm with my clients, and usually in any other circumstance, I'm a strong believer, and I apply universal laws.
Yeah.
In particular, the law of duality, as you've heard me say before. There's no prey without a predator. There's no predator without a prey. There's no good without bad. There's no bad without good. Where there's a negative, we should look at the benefits. Where there's a positive, we should look at the drawbacks, and not live in this one-sided world. And obviously, I've been through stuff, and I've looked at it, how it served me today. But right now, Zach, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to look at the benefits of losing Zach.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. And later on, I will see how it served me. And when I speak to this with my clients and the people I try and teach how to apply certain laws, I say to them, it doesn't make it right or wrong what's happened. I mean, if someone's been abused or if someone's died, or it's wrong, it's sad. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but what I'm saying is, look at the benefits, how it's serving you today, how it served you at the time, how it's serving other people or them. And I'm struggling with that right now, but I know I will. I mean, Zach lost his younger brother in September. So then the way I look at it is that it's serving him by being closer to his brother, being with his brother. And they were like twins, even though it was 4.5, 5 years difference. How is it serving me? It's serving me that I'm dedicating the show to him. We're trying to help other people who are experiencing loss. We're talking about it. We're talking about different ways how you can overcome or or have, start the journey to overcome any kind of loss. But that's what I'm looking at the moment. But I know in time with the family, and we know, and we know why we say that is because we don't want to stay in that rut. We want to bring it to an equilibrium, so we can stop living the nightmare and we can start living the inspirational, the fulfillment of life, because that's the only way we can do when we look at the both sides.
Yeah, and again, it's hearkening back to what we talked about earlier with the spiritual bypass, because the phrase that comes to mind, someone said to me once, nothing could be truer but less useful in this moment. And, to say, let's look at the gifts of this, it might be, for some, it might be perfectly, that's where they're at. But for you right now in this moment, that might be not where you're at. And so honoring, yes, I'm sure at one point I'll be able to look at all the wonderful things that come from this. And, again, if the mind is deeply conditioned to believe in this duality, or let me say it a different way. If the mind is deeply conditioned to look at the world only through the lens of duality, then if one of us says, well, something wonderful will come from this, it might almost be shocking, because we might hear me saying, oh, well, it's not a sad event, or it's not painful, or it's not difficult. The reality is we're on planet Earth, and people are born and we have these experiences. People do die, including ourselves, at least at this point in our evolution of consciousness. So being able to embrace that as part of the journey, I think, is really important. What that doesn't mean is pretending like it's not painful or whatever we're experiencing. For me, what it does mean is holding multiple truths. Yes, I know at some point I'm going to be able to lean into all the gifts. Zach brought you so many gifts. There'll be a point when you're able to be in the gratitude for his life rather than the pain of his passing. And right now, you're in this experience, and the last thing we want to do is move into let me move into the frequency of gratitude, because if we're doing that so we don't feel what's present, then what happens is we keep it alive. Now, David Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force, among other books, and the book Letting Go, one of my favorite authors and teachers. And I don't know if this is true, but this is what he says. And he says, if we really allow ourselves to grieve, it will pass through us in 20 minutes. Now, I don't know if that's true. And I do understand the spirit of what he's saying, because I remember, I'm hearkening back to really early in my life, in my early 20s, when a friend of mine either overdosed or committed suicide. We'll never know for sure what happened. I remember just feeling this intense pain when I heard the news. And within about 4 minutes, I shut it down. And I, found ways to distract myself. And the grief of the experience that I had with Colin lasted for years, because every time I'd start to feel it, I would cry, and I would almost, in my mind, and I want to say this was in my mind at that time, I felt like I was falling apart, and it felt so scary. So about 7 or 8 minutes in, I would button it up and go on with my life, and some of us have been taught, oh, let's just, be strong. And that grief stayed alive. So I understand the spirit of what Hawkins is saying about that. It's like, oh, wow, can I just let myself really experience this? Because it does pass through us if we do.
Thank you. I've got some messages, TJ. Angel has said hi, smiley face. Robert Dosa, hi there. Arab, who's a son of Zach, has given a heart emoji.
Mm-hmm.
Eugene, so sorry for your loss, Saf, sending love and prayers. Daniela, hi Daniela. She's saying, I feel that we need more helpers on the other side. Zach will always be there for you. Angel says yes to that. And then she says, the lovely thing is they become our help here on the planet. Daniela says, I appreciate this conversation. And Angel says, being strong can be to just allow to feel.
Yeah.
That's powerful, right?
Yes. Yeah, because so many of us have been taught strength is something that it actually isn't, right? Strength really is, well, there are multiple ways we can talk about it, but one aspect to strength, as we've been saying throughout the show, is just letting myself be present with what is. And I love the part about helpers on the other side, because that has been my experience. You know, some of my great teachers and mentors, going back to especially Mary Helen, she's with me, and there are these moments that I feel her guidance. I've had profound moments where I'm in a room and I can smell her perfume, and it's not really in the room, but it really is in the room. And so there's evidence that I have experienced that lets me know that no one really ever leaves us, but we're in a multi-dimensional reality, and it's easy for us to see only this one because we've been taught that that's reality. But we really know it's much more expansive than that. And the Course in Miracles says, all I know is not all there is to know. And that reminds me, when I'm in the middle of this, okay, I don't know everything about what it means to grieve. I don't know everything, like, you know, because it's easy to go into the big questions. Why are we on planet Earth? Why do people die? Why? And that why can keep us, for me, the why can keep me in a treadmill or like a hamster wheel, right? Continuously asking those questions. And I can step off of that. And there's a lot of, I think, power and wisdom in, wow, I don't really know. I don't know what this is all about. And there's something much bigger than just me and my perspective, my human perspective at play here. And I might know more as this evolves. And right now, this is what I'm experiencing.
Wow. Steve Weber. Hi, Steve. Burying emotions isn't the answer.
Right.
You know, Steve, you've been on a platform with him recently, I believe, and
Yes.
Mr. Forrest Gump himself. Angel says, "Love so nice to flow, true from side to side," and it's beautiful when you think about the good times. It really is. But when someone goes, they go. But it's the people that they leave behind who are suffering, and it's like, do you know what I mean? It's like, but we're gonna miss you, Zach. We really are. You're one in a million. But we're talking like this, and this is what I'm saying. And the similarities with loss and addiction, even though they can be relatable in one way, is if we work in communion, if we work as a collective and support each other and work and have this togetherness, we can all get through this. You can get through addiction. You can get through loss. I know people have their own ways of mourning, have their own ways of recovery, but ultimately they both come down to connection.
Yeah.
All about
connection. And I think that's really what you're speaking to, Saf, is that's really, for me, that's the greatest grief that comes up is I felt such a deep connection with this person. And at least on some level, I have a belief or an experience, a valid experience, that there's loss there or there's disconnection. And in the midst of that, I get to reconnect with this person that is very much alive. And again, the layers are so interesting because I don't want to go to that without allowing myself to feel. And also, again, as I said, reminding myself that these feelings aren't going to last forever. And I think that's where the phrase time heals the wounds. And I will say, yes, that's true. And if I can consciously grieve, that healing process can move along much more quickly. And then I can move into the energy of gratitude for the person and what the gifts they brought to planet Earth and how I can be a part of continuing the legacy, because that's really it. If we think about the great teachers of our time, whether that's in our individual life or collectively throughout history, they're very much alive in our hearts. And many of us dedicate ourselves to teachings of people who lived thousands of years ago that brought a profound message that now we're a part of carrying on. And that really happens collectively, but it also happens individually with the people that have had a profound impact on us. There are people in my life that I have no contact with. I'm thinking of a high school teacher. We stayed in touch for many, many years, and then we lost touch with each other. But she saw me in a time that was so painful for me, trying to come up, who am I? What am I? My identity, my addiction was starting to bloom, let's put it that way. And she was this beautiful presence that saw me, and she had such a profound impact on me. And even though we're not in each other's lives, she's always with me. And her being that teacher changed me, and I find myself bringing a lot of her into my work as well. So yes, people are very much alive within us and in the field or the energy of spirit, and also we get to acknowledge that it can feel really, really painful when someone leaves the planet.
Thank you, TJ. We've gone through this episode really quickly today, and I think it's just flowed beautifully. What I do want to do, one of the main things that you may agree, you may not, or I got from the 12 steps, was the serenity prayer. And in fact, if there's a prayer that I say more than any other prayer, it's probably that one, because it means a lot to me, that prayer. And when I say the word God, of course, it's God of your own understanding. Not everyone believes in religion or believes in anything really, but so when I say God is God of your understanding, and you can have God whatever you want it to be, whatever you want him to be, whatever you want her to be. But I'm going to say the serenity prayer, if I may, and I'm saying this to give a message of hope to people, because the words are quite powerful and they make sense, and it goes something like this: God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. And just like to leave it there. I'm gonna leave it with photographs of Zach. But any last words that you'd like to say to the family, friends, or anyone who's going through a loss right now?
Well, first of all, thank you, Saf, for your courage and bringing this. We bring our full selves into the experience, and that really is the number one thing we can do for ourselves and for, the people in our lives as we're going through grief, and that is simply being present. And so in closing, what I would say to anyone going through grief or loss is to be gentle with yourself as much as possible. And remember that underneath all of this, there is still this place within you that's whole and perfect, regardless of what you're experiencing.
Thank you, TJ. I will look forward to being with you next Tuesday on a different note, and we'll go bang into the addiction recovery. But thank you very much for supporting me today. Thank you for allowing this show to go ahead. I really, really appreciate it, and thank you very much, guys. I may not be doing my show on this Thursday, Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories, but please watch out for updates just in case I do. But as usual, my Feel Good Factor TV show is going to be every Saturday morning, as always, 10 a.m. And Sunday morning, 10 a.m. So please check that out on Sky Channel 191, Sky Showcase. And we'll see you next Tuesday. But I'm going to finish with a couple of photographs. The first photograph, I'm not sure if you can hear my voice. I'm going to put them. I'm going to tell you what it is. The first photograph is of Zach and his younger brother, who both aren't with us now, and they were like twins and always together. The second photograph will be with myself and Zach at my 40th birthday party, where we had a gangster party. TJ, it was amazing, and we both do look quite menacing. Probably not, but we've got the caps on and the Cuban look. And the last photograph is of Zach, who probably the hardest working person I know, and it's him at his own business working. He could never stop working. Thank you, guys. Thanks, TJ.
Thank you, Saf.
Thank you.